Hello, it is Tara Boothby, and I have really been enjoying some conversation online about attachment theory, love science, understanding why we move in and out of relationships. So I wanted to talk more about love science, love energy. That's the concept that I really am introducing to the conversation, and why I like the idea of using the language of love energy is really because there is it energy between people. We co-regulate into relationships. The better able we are to co-regulate into a relationship, the better the energy, the better our ability to balance energy, to consider the relational space that's going to work for us. And so the more securishness we have with people, the better quality love energy we have. The more dysfunctional the relationship, the more negative energy we have, and the more unloving those relationships will be experienced. So I shared this quote. I thought my dear mentor Robin William Blake said it, well, Robin Williams Blake, but it turns out it's Sam Janish, who is also an emotionally focused theory trainer. And the quote is just this: attachment is remembered and not taught. I think this is a fabulous point of contemplation. Attachment is remembered and not taught. So we know from a nature and a nurture perspective that nurture is a requirement of our survival. A baby's born thinking they're the center of the universe, and so they are noticing how to move into relationship to really make sure that they are cared for. If a baby's left on their own, they die. So children, there's different theories of whether babies are changing their behavior or not. I tend to be of the school of thought that a child will adjust their behavior to please the one that is going to provide for them. It makes sense. It makes sense because we do it as adults as well. If something I am doing is unacceptable, then I'm going to stop it, because I want to connect with people. We have a desire to fit in. This is why I have Brene Brown's quote at the beginning of my book. I'm going to read this quote. I wasn't planning on it, but Brene writes, bear with me. Fitting in is about assessing a situation and becoming who you need to be accepted. Belonging, on the other hand, doesn't require us to change who we are. It requires us to be who we are. There's a lot of developmental growth and milestones that a person has to get through to get to a place where we realize our choice to lean into I can belong in a relationship rather than I need to fit in order to survive and to find out how to live. Interesting. Interesting to think about relational humanistic theories from a behavioral perspective and from a scientific perspective. There's lots of research on looking at why babies do what they do and why babies and young children develop different strategies of moving in and out of relationships, looking at the parental figure. Okay, so attachment is remembered and not taught. Now, this is a hopeful statement for people who have had good enough parenting in their family of origin experience. There's some template hardwired into us based on our early childhood relationships, good or bad. Again, I'm kind of the mindset. I appreciate evolutionary psychology much more than I anticipated I would in my career, but we have a nature and we have a nurture. There is a hardwire inside of us. There is an ability for us to discover nurture, um, even if we've had the most detrimental early childhood experiences. That attachment is remembered, and I really gauge that even if we've had traumas with our primary, secondary, third, fourth, fifth caregivers, whatever traumas we've had, it makes it way easier. It definitely dysregulates our ability to navigate how we move in and out of relationships. Yet we have these beautiful biological bodies that we live in, We have an inner cosmos, and part of that is something that's hardwired into us. That is not just our nature to survive, but the realization that nurture helps us to survive better with more longevity. Lots of research on adults and how these nurturing relationships promotes mental health, physical health, emotional, sexual, physical, all the things, all the health, all the health. Relationships are good for us. If you're in distress and a loved one holds your hand, the distress dramatically decreases. If you're in distress and a stranger holds your hand, there's still some decrease. Relationship, that one other is with me in my time of need, is very relevant for the conversation of how we continue to move forward. Also, there's this phenomena and this trend that we see, especially now as North American culture is so much more individualistic, that people have difficulty. We notice an adult trauma, or we realize some things that were painful in our family of origin story, our beliefs change, all of these things. And it's harder to trust that we can share this painful experience with a community. And so then many people, that's why they'll seek out a psychologist. We want confidentiality. We don't want people to know that we're hurting. That's a relatively new phenomenon in the history of anthropology. In our anthropology, the experience prior to technology was so much more collective. And so somebody would endure something and we would lean into the community, or within the community, we had to be challenged on our ability to navigate love energy, the relationships we feel good or bad in, because we couldn't as easily escape the relationships that we were in. So that's interesting as well. In the individualistic culture, we tend to have more license. We give ourselves more license to just cut off the relationships that are not serving us, rather than trying to navigate, how can I find a way to move into this relationship and be within love's kind? How can I figure out how to be in this relationship and like who I am, have a positive view of myself? How can I lean into this relationship, move into this relationship, and like who the other person is, have a positive view of the other person? It's a lot of nuances that are not quite so nuanced about understanding the difficulty of managing relationships, and how painful it is when relationships fall apart. When we trust, when we have some experience of more secure-ish relationships, when we have some sort of idea of the goodness of love energy, it does help us as we move forward in relationships to have more hope for healing in what is not great love energy. It also lends us more hope to evaluate whether a relationship is salvageable and we can move into more and more safety, emotional safety, or if a relationship is past the point of repair, which happens. It's sad. It's really sad. And it's good to weigh out when we move in and when we don't, and realize that there's a time and a place for both. There's a time to heal and mend our human relationships, and there's a painful time to say goodbye. So sometimes people will worry when you have a lot of early childhood trauma that you're irreparable, you're broken beyond the point of any sort of healing. Relationships are not going to be a possibility for you. And maybe you've taken the ACEs quiz and you see, wow, I have a lot of interference in my early childhood and that impacts me. Maybe you've talked to a psychologist and they've said, yeah, you've got some markers of deep dysregulation, and it's going to be harder for you not to be preoccupied, over preoccupied, or codependent. It's going to be harder for you not to be deeply avoidant or withdrawn or detached. It's going to be harder for you to trust whether you are good or bad, or other people are good or bad. What we really recover in our modern view of humanistic psychology, what we really recover in love science and attachment theory, our modern view is it's never too late for us to rediscover what love science is. The chemical equation inside of us has been inside of us our entire life. Each one of us is full of science, and our ability to thrive in relationships and our ability to learn better how to have better and better quality of love energy is definitely there. More trauma, the more difficult, more trauma that we've endured, the smaller window of capacity we may have for good love energy, but we still can learn. And it's worth the rediscovery of what we are meant to know of what human love is. We're designed for love. We thrive because of love. We survive because of love. That's beautiful. Love is not fluff. Although sometimes the fluff is kind of fun, right? We don't have to throw all the fluff out, even though the science is just so much more exciting. The fluff is fun. And when we understand that we can earn security, so that circle of security language that we're going to use, that it's never too late, and we can earn security, we can have better relationships. If you've been married long term, or you've had friendships long term, if you've been friends with somebody for over 20 years, you have fought for that relationship, and you have figured out how to move out of the friendship at times and move back into the friendship at times. Friendships, adult friendships, are a great example. Sometimes even better than marriage, because adult friendships are quite tricky and nuanced. In our individualistic culture, it's easier to say bye-bye. If you've been able to maintain connection to a community as an adult, that's another great example. The longer we're in these relationships, we have proof and experience of evaluating our view of self and our view of others, and having to change beliefs or adjust beliefs so that we can maintain relationships. And of course, that's true for marriage. And of course, that's true for parenting. Parenting perspective, the better I am, I'm a parent, you're a parent, but I'm going to use some proxy here. The better I am at evaluating my view of self and my view of my child, the better able I am to look at when I'm in a negative view of myself, or I'm in a negative view of my child, the better able I am to evaluate how to step back into a positive view of myself and or positive view of my child, so that I can be accessible, responsive, and emotionally engaged. That's the parent position from the emotionally focused point of view. Accessibility, responsiveness, and emotional engagement. That's great leadership. What's going on in this conversation? So again, attachment is remembered, not taught. And when we're navigating through, why do I do what I do? And why do you do what you do? Why do I feel safe in this way and unsafe in that way? Why do you feel safe with me in this way and not in that way? When we're starting to lend into the conversation of what's working and not working in our relationships, it's really encouraging to just remember that we're trying to remember. We're trying to remember the experiences that we had somewhere in our past, even if it was just with one person. We're trying to remember the experience that we were meant to have, if it seems that we never have had it at all. Big conversation. Big conversation talking about attachment theory, love science, love energy. And I'm glad that people are thinking about it more. It is pretty crazy making. Try to simplify it as best you can. When we're dysregulated and distressed inside, we either move into relationships or out of relationships. There's no right or wrong. We're generally all a mixed bag. Sometimes we move in and sometimes we move out. The more we give ourselves permission to navigate co-regulation and self-regulation, what is working for me to have a positive view of myself and a positive view of you in the relationship, the better able we are to navigate our relationships, the better able people are to navigate relationships with us, and the more we can grow in the experience we're designed to have in our human relationships. And then the whole supernatural stuff is fun, but we don't have to figure that one out ever. And we certainly don't have to figure it out when we're trying to navigate through the difficulty of the day to day, just being in the same heart of love as everybody else. There's a lot in this one. So if it felt like you were drinking from the fire hose, I apologize, but sometimes I do that. I hang out with people who do it. Thinkers like to think together. And when we're by ourselves, maybe that's even more dangerous than when we're thinking collectively. And yeah, peace and love. And if you have questions or ideas about attachment that you're curious about, feel free to DM me. Sometimes people prefer to DM than put a note at the bottom of these little videos. So I'm happy to hear your thoughts and to chat about the things that you want to chat. Some of why I'm talking about this right here is because of questions and wonderings that people were messaging to me on side conversations. Have a good one.